Alright everyone, welcome back to another video. Last time we left off with the Golden Decade, talking about the 20s, kind of about some of the stuff that went on during the Roaring 20s. But the 20s don't last forever. We're now on to the Great Depression. Ever since Joseph prophesied to the Egyptian pharaoh that the fat kine would be followed by the lean kine, or in more modern terms, a boom period would be followed by a depression. People have understood economic cycles. The United States had had major depressions in 1837, 1857, 1873, and 1893, as well as minor recessions. Each was acute for about 3 years, and each had been preceded by a wave of speculations on the stock market. The Depression, which hit the United States in 1929, was more severe and extensive than any of these, mainly because the nation had become more completely industrialized. Farmers affected by the state of the market but there is always some demand for food, and at worst, the farmers can raise their own. But when John Citizen says to his wife, "My dear, we can't afford that new car this year," a factory closes down and hundreds of unemployed are turned into the street. This, in turn, reduces effective demand and slows industry yet more. One of the main causes of the Depression was of European origins. Recovery from World War I had been slow and only partial. Europeans could neither buy American goods nor pay back war loans to the United States. In several foreign countries, the currency had been inflated beyond recovery. The consequent dislocation of international trade was bound to affect the United States adversely. Another key factor was the overproduction of consumer goods in the United States, for which the market had dried up. In October 1929, a panic hit Wall Street. In 3 days, an estimated $15 billion in market value had been wiped out in frantic selling, and by the end of the year, some $40 billion. An unemployment census in 1930 reported 3 million of the usually employed to be out of work. In 1932, the number had soared to an estimated 15 million. Attempts were made, of course, to hold off the panic by leading politicians and financiers who had made reassuring statements. They agreed that the nation was fundamentally sound, that the ruin of a few speculators was not the ruin of the country, and that prosperity was just around the corner. But it took a long time to turn around that corner. Reverberations from Europe aggravated the American situation. National income dwindled from $81 billion in 1929 to $41 billion in 1932. When people have suffered severe economic loss, they are apt to turn against any government then in power. The European Depression brought Adolf, I can't say his last name, which is funny, brought Adolf into power in Germany and deposed the King of Spain. The United States has always escaped revolution, but it is notable that each Great Depressions, I should say, has been followed at the next general election by political reversal. In 1840, the Democrats suffered their first defeat in 4 decades when the Whigs elected William Henry Tippecanoe Harrison. In 1860, the Republicans came first into power. In 1876, the Democrats were so close to winning that the result hung in doubt long after the election. In 1869, the Republicans replaced the Democrats. The Depression made a Democratic victory in 1932 inevitable. President Hoover was renominated, but neither he nor his party had much hope for victory. The Democratic convention was a short but bitter contest between Al Smith, the nominee 4 years earlier, and Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was easily nominated and elected. In 1928, Hoover had 21 million popular votes to Smith's 15 million and carried 40 states. In 1932, he had less than 16 million to Roosevelt's almost 23 million and carried only 5 states. President Hoover had taken some measures to fight the Depression. He instituted a Reconstruction Finance Corporation to bolster weak links in the national economy. But he was fundamentally a self-made individualist and did not wish to take the federal government too deeply into the sphere of direct charity. By 1932, the United States was ready for far more drastic remedies. I'm going to see. I think that is all of the speaking here. But we obviously have a lot of pictures to go over. Yep, okay. Yeah, the Great Depression is one of the worst economic events maybe in human history. It's really, really, really bad. People get entire life savings wiped out, and in some ways, it's not in some ways actually, in major ways, its effects are still felt today. Um, One, if people think that a crash is going to happen, they're like, oh no, it scared people of economic depressions, which are very a natural thing, it's going to happen. But it's made a fear in people that just is never overcome. There are some people that are, if they're old enough, their parents taught them because their parents wouldn't be. Actually, no, that's not true. Some people would still remember the depression and uh, would remember some of the tactics that they used to survive the depression. So, if you ever heard of individuals who keep money in their under their bed or in their bed, on their mattress specifically, um, people would do that. They would stock food, things like that. A lot of that is still left over from the depression, and even the ways that we got out of it that fixed it have caused other issues in the future. FDR will request, well, actually, will take people's gold. So the gold in the country gets very much put into the hands of the government and then the wealthy. So it kind of, in some ways, for future generations, kind of screws them over. And all sorts of different things happen because of the Great Depression. Um, it's really, really not great. But we'll now get on to the pictures. Above here is Black Tuesday. It was October 29th when 16.4 million shares changed hands, and the bottom dropped out of the market. Yeah, there are some stories, how true they are, we don't know, that when all this went down, people were jumping out of buildings. It's not crazy to think that that happened, but we don't really necessarily know. There's some that say no, it didn't happen. Some that says yes, it did. You know how it is. At the top right, thousands of people were left without work, and many had no food to eat. Yeah, a lot of people would become homeless from this. They'd have no food. They'd have no anything. All of their stuff gone. And you see here, these guys are sitting on benches. If you look at some of these benches, you'll see small things like if I can't get rid of it, like this here and that there. There will be examples of this, and it's basically um, it's to prevent people sleeping on these benches because some people would fall asleep on benches or lay down basically. You can see it if you look at any old city park. if they have a stone wall or metal, even potentially. If you see the spikes on top of them, if they're especially if they're stone, the big stone blocks, they have little stone pyramids on top, little spikes. It's to prevent people from sleeping on them, and a lot of that goes back to the Depression because people were so homeless that they would sleep on them. They were so homeless, so destitute that there were so many of them too that they would sleep in parks, sleep on walls, anywhere. Um, just awful. At the right here, destitute men in Washington, D.C. stand in line to receive relief packages at the Central Union Mission, 1930. Now, there's relief things. Because the subsistence farmer is gone, that's why this depression hits so much harder. Um, Something like the Great Depression could happen again. It just could. Subsistence farming is well and truly gone. So whole markets would just collapse. Not just whole markets, whole. Honestly, a depression like this happening today could lead to whole civilizations collapsing. Just gonna be honest. At the left, bread lines stretched for blocks in many parts of the country. This scene was photographed at the corner of 6th Avenue and 42nd Street in New York City in February 1932. Yeah, there's huge bread lines, food lines, all sorts of different things that people will do. And if you look at other nations as well, besides just the United States, obviously this is about the American people, but we'll just get into that. Some in Germany, for instance, the entire country basically collapses somewhat. It's quite bad, quite bad. At the top here, hunger marches were organized protesting the lack of government help and providing food for out-of-work people. This march took place in Washington, D.C. on the 6th of December, 1931. Yeah, a lot of people blame the government for not helping. It's why we get a lot of these welfare programs, things like that today. It's because of this depression. And to be fair, because the subsistence farmer and all that is gone, you kind of have to do something like this because otherwise you're going to have millions and millions and millions of people starving to death and just dying, and for other reasons as well. The right here, in the mid 1930s came the mass exodus from the Dust Bowl to the West Coast. A picture of a family from Missouri that was entitled by the photographer Broke Sick Baby Car Trouble. John Steinbeck chronicled the plight of these Okies in his novel The Grapes of Wrath. Yes, so there's also another issue going on at this time. The Midwest of the United States has become this dust bowl. Um, how farming had been done at the time just drained water and resource nutrients from the ground. And so it kills the ground and it just becomes this big dust bowl. Because a lot of people were doing crops for money. So they would just farm over and over and over and over the same crop and it just killed the land. Um, and so a lot of these people have to leave and that also hurts during the depression because there's no a lot less farmers now that and so there's even more people and it's just two things that hit right at the same time. So you have the depression going on and then you have all these people that can no longer grow food and have to try to escape somewhere to just survive. And it's just yeah, just awful. The Dust Bowl will be solved as well afterwards. They will have rotation farming, so you grow one year, you grow this crop, next year grow this crop, that kind of thing. It helps with the land. Not the crops don't all use the same nutrients, things like that. At the top here, tenant farmers in Chatham, North Carolina, 1939. Yeah, you can see. Poor guys. Above, these those fortunate enough to find agricultural work often had to live in horrible shacks. This is Oklahoma City, July 1939. Yeah, you know, if you find work, sometimes you gotta live in just like this squalor, and it's pretty awful. Just awful. And at the right here is an abandoned farm in the middle of the Dust Bowl, Oklahoma, 1936. You can see what I mean now. Look at all the dust and just it's just awful. A lot of people abandon their farms. A lot of the Midwest gets unsettled, I should say, because a lot of these people just can't live here anymore. Land's just barren, and it really is quite awful. But with that, that is going to do it for this video. If you guys like the video, leave a like. If you ever want anything I can improve on these videos, if you comment down below, I just appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.